Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for September 20th of 2023, and currently we have two different marginal threats for today. We do have a marginal threat for southeastern Oklahoma into western Arkansas and northeastern Texas, as well as a marginal threat that does include western Wyoming, southeastern Idaho, northwestern Utah, and northeastern Nevada. As for threats for today, we don't really have all that much of a tornado threat, but we do have two different 5% wind threats for both of the marginal threats. And as for hail, we do have a 5% hail threat for the marginal threat for the Central Plains. As for our primary threats for these different marginal threat locations, both wind and hail are going to be the primary threat for the Central Plains, and we are expected to see the primary threat of damaging winds for the western United States. Taking a look at the tropics, primarily focusing on this disturbance in orange across the eastern United States coast. Currently, we have a fairly low threat of this developing this week. It currently has a 10% chance of tropical development in the next 48 hours and a 40% chance in the next 7 days. We could potentially see a increasing threat for this developing into a tropical storm or a tropical depression across the eastern United States coast. The threat for this developing has increased since last forecast, so we could potentially see this continue to increase into next week. Overall, I think that the impacts coming from this are going to spill over into next week, as overall we do have a fairly low chance of it developing this week, but we could definitely see some tropical developments across the eastern United States coast and anywhere affected by this tropical system into early next week. We could potentially see the threat of coastal flooding and the threat of maybe some high surf and rip current along the coast, but overall threats should be fairly minor coming from this tropical development. Taking a look at our radar Omega model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, focusing on the marginal threat for the central United States. You can see that we do have a very weak subtropical jet that is going to break off from the rest of the subtropical jet today. You can see it is fairly weak as of right now. It is going to be anywhere from the 30 knots into 40 knots, possibly get into some of the 50 knots. However, I think a lot of the purples that you are seeing are going to be because of high winds because of storm development in this region. So we could definitely see some overall more marginal thunderstorm development as it is further out from the mountains, so we aren't expected to see very strong lee troughing to aid in severe thunderstorm development this far to the east. But this shortwave trough should lead to overall more marginal thunderstorm development and the threat of damaging winds. However, we could still see some lingering elongated photographs from some of the very, very strong upper level winds that we had in the 100 knots and above. We could still see some elongated photographs to support the possibility of small to medium hail across this region and the threat of damaging winds as well. But then if we take a look at the rest of the subtropical jet and this trough that is making its way out of the Pacific Northwest, you can see that this trough is going to be pulling the rest of the subtropical jet a little bit to the north. So it's going to break away from the rest of the subtropical jet, which is going to dip down into the Gulf of Mexico. However, as this trough continues its trek southward, it is going to trigger severe thunderstorm development across the Rockies for Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada for today. Taking a look at dew points, focusing on the marginal threat for the central United States plains, you can see that we are expected to have some fairly strong moisture across this region. With some of the southerly flow that we've had out of the Gulf of Mexico and some of the rounds of severe thunderstorms and rain showers that we've had across the central plains, we could definitely see some building moisture in the atmosphere across the central plains to lead to building instability across the central plains. So we are expected to have some fairly strong instability with dew points that are going to be ranging anywhere from the low 60s into the upper 60s and mid 60s, as well as the low 70s, which will definitely support the threat of some fairly strong instability across this region. You can see that we are also expected to have a little bit of a dry line develop across western Texas. However, this dry line is going to be a little bit too far to the west to really aid in severe thunderstorm development. This marginal threat is too far to the east compared to this dry line to really allow for the dry line to aid in severe thunderstorm development. However, yesterday, where we had that slight risk region across the Red River, we definitely did have that dry line, and storms did develop right on that dry line. However, because this marginal threat is too far to the east and this dry line is too far to the west, this dry line shouldn't aid in severe thunderstorm development, but we should definitely see some fairly strong instability across this region to support the threat of damaging winds and small to medium hail. But then if we take a look at the marginal threat for the western United States, you can see that we are expected to have overall fairly weak moisture across this region, which will lead to overall fairly weak instability across this region as well. We are expected to have dew points that are going to be ranging anywhere from the 20s into the 30s, and even a very small batch over the Salt Lake City region, where we have the Salt Lake in Utah, with dew points that are going to be getting into the upper 50s, right around the Salt Lake in Utah. So overall, we are expected to have a fairly weak moisture, which isn't really going to lead to any really strong instability. We are expected to see Cape values that are going to be probably in the triple digits, the mid to upper triple digits. Taking a look at the temperatures, let's mainly focus on the Central Plains. You can see that we are expected to have those rounds of severe thunderstorms from today and yesterday, and some of the thunderstorms from last week as well, is going to lead to a bunch of cooling across the Central Plains. However, we should still see temperatures that are going to get into the 90s across Texas, no problem. However, we are expected to have much weaker temperatures compared to a couple weeks back, where we had widespread temperatures in 100 and above. However, we aren't expected to see that anymore, as fall. We are currently in meteorological fall. So we are expected to see much cooler temperatures coming soon, if not already. And you can see that we are expected to have major cooling across Texas already. We are expected to see some temperatures that could get very close to 100 across some regions in the upper 90s. But this should go away fairly soon. I don't think that we're going to have temperatures building over this week. We are expected to see major cooling instead of temperature building across a vast majority of the Central Plains. But then let's take a look at the marginal threat, let's take a look at the northwestern United States. I'm not really going to be focusing on the marginal threat and how our temperature will affect instability. I mainly want to focus on the nighttime temperatures across the Pacific Northwest. You can see that we are expected to have tons and tons of below freezing temperatures. Anywhere where you see these colors that are going to be in the pinks, like right here and right here, that is going to indicate temperatures below freezing. So we are definitely expected to see temperatures that are going to be below freezing across some of the Rocky Mountains, as well as overall just very, very cold temperatures across a lot of the Rocky Mountains in the Pacific Northwest, because of this trough coming out of Canada. So we are definitely expected to see major cooling across the United States, because we are getting very, very close to fall. Taking a look at our instability, focusing on the marginal threat for the central United States, you can see that we are expected to have some fairly strong instability across this region. We are expected to see Cape values are going to range anywhere from the triple digits into the 1000s, and even into the 2000s range, getting as high up as the low 2000s. This will definitely support the possibility of some damaging winds and the threat of small to medium hail with some of the elongated photographs that we have. But then let's take a look at the marginal threat for the western United States. You can see that we are expected to have overall fairly weak instability across this region. We are expected to see Cape values are going to be ranging anywhere from the very low triple digits into the mid triple digits, and getting into the 1000s across Utah, Salt Lake. That is going to be because of some of the increased moisture across the Salt Lake of Utah, which is going to lead to increased instability. However, overall widespread, we are expected to see very, very weak instability for this marginal threat region, which will really only be able to support the threat of damaging winds across this region. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And if you live in any of the areas that I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.